Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996. Her father, Gregory Lueck, worked in healthcare logistics and administration, while her mother, Diana, was a homemaker. She grew up in El Segundo, Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was on the swim team and played water polo. She was a dedicated student with a passion for art, music, and animals. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Utah, majoring in kinesiology and nursing. She was also involved in the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While at the University of Utah, she expressed her support for women's rights and later left one of the major political parties to join a third conservative party. Mackenzie works at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. She recalls the days when she biked to the Pacific Ocean, wearing a bikini and sunbathing in the high desert. She plans to pursue a career in the healthcare field, is considering nursing or medical school, and is scheduled to graduate in May 2020. The Lueck family was typical, but everything changed on June 17, 2019, when Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City after her grandmother's funeral. Early on the morning of June 17, around 2 a.m., Mackenzie texted her mother after landing at Salt Lake City International Airport from California, "Landed and love you, Mom." However, when Diana tried to contact Mackenzie again, she realized that her daughter's phone was turned off. Gregory also called Mackenzie, but it went straight to voicemail, leaving the Lueck family worried about her well-being. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents discovered that her friends had not heard from her either. They reported Mackenzie missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, Mackenzie's family attempted to track her down from California. Members of Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority began searching for her in Utah. Together, they created a Find Mackenzie Lueck Facebook page to bring national media attention to the matter. Investigators are working to figure out what happened. They have video evidence showing Mackenzie at the airport. She was then taken by a Lyft driver to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles from the airport. Investigators have also verified Mackenzie's cell phone information, confirming that she was at the park. Detectives have discovered that Mackenzie had been exchanging text messages with a stranger named Iola Ajayi. Mackenzie is believed to have met Iola through a dating website and agreed to meet. The last text message Mackenzie sent to Iola was at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone data showed that both Mackenzie and Iola were at Hatch Park, and at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting location data, indicating that her phone was turned off. Detectives then tracked Iola's cell phone signal, leading them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in the Fair Park neighborhood. Investigators determined that Iola's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Based on this evidence, detectives decided to execute a search warrant at Iola's home because he was considered a prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance. During the search of Iola's residence, a neighbor reported a terrible odor coming from a gasoline-fueled campfire in Iola's backyard, next to a garage, on June 17th and 18th. Investigators impounded Iola's vehicle when they detected a strong odor of gasoline and found a red gasoline can in the trunk. They determined that Iola had purchased a similar can of gasoline at a local store on the morning of Mackenzie's disappearance, at 9 a.m. After Iola was arrested, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and located the phone in Logan Canyon, where Iola admitted to his attorney that he had buried Mackenzie's body on June 25th, between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of the area and discovered a disturbed dirt in a wooded area near a major road. There, they found the charred remains of a person. An autopsy conducted on July 3 identified the body as that of Mackenzie Lueck. She had been bound with rope behind her back. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull and ruled her death a homicide. On October 7, 2020, Iola was convicted of first-degree murder and third-degree indignity in connection with Mackenzie's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and an additional 5 years in prison for the indignity to Mackenzie's body. Iola was also charged with kidnapping another woman he met on a dating app in March 2018. The victim turned herself in after Iola was arrested for Mackenzie's murder. On October 7, 2020, Iola pleaded guilty to second-degree sexual abuse in connection with that case and was later sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. Iola was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 after police discovered multiple images of child pornography on his computer during the investigation into Mackenzie's death. The images, allegedly depicting children between the ages of 4 and 8, were discovered on July 2. Iola pleaded not guilty on October 1, 2020, and the charges related to the obscene act were later dismissed. The tragic loss of Mackenzie Lueck has shocked her loved ones and the nation. Her bright smile, zest for life, and dream of making a difference were taken from her in a senseless way. Nevertheless, Mackenzie's loved ones have come together to remember and honor her life. Her sorority friends remember her as a shining light, always ready to help and encourage. Through her art, music, and love for animals, Mackenzie's spirit lives on. Her story serves as a reminder to be vigilant and cautious, especially when engaging in online dating services. But more importantly, it reminds us of the value of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of 2 daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his 2 sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicky is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicky was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicky over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and the means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with coworkers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked and they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands for Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Hickey had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Hickey decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Hickey checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Hickey, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Hickey kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Hickey still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Hickey, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Hickey, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Hickey soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Hickey took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Hickey and living with his parents. Hickey was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Hickey threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Hickey's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Hickey then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Hickey's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Hickey's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Hickey had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Hickey's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Hickey had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Hickey to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Hickey's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Hickey had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Hickey's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Hickey had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Hickey's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Hickey and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lavinia T., and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, when Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family. She was the youngest of two children. Her parents, Al Morales and Brian, raised her along with her older brother, Omar. Luz Maria's early life was marked by a serious health scare. As an infant, she nearly died due to an intestinal obstruction and underwent a complex surgery. Although her doctors were uncertain about her chances of recovery, her mother's prayers and faith played a significant role in Luz Maria's survival. Fortunately, the surgery did not affect Luz Maria's development. She grew up to be a healthy and active child. During her school years, Luz Maria was a sporty. She was actively involved in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance. She easily makes friends with everyone and got along with people from different backgrounds. Luz Maria excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After completing her secondary education, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university. She chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. A fateful encounter took place when Luz Maria accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. The occasion was her older brother's 25th birthday, and the family wanted to surprise him with a motorcycle he had always desired. Inside the dealership, they were warmly greeted by a courteous and attentive young sales consultant named Jorge, who showcased the available models, offering some advice. Although Luz Maria and her mother have already chosen a model, but they want to consider and discuss it with her father before making a decision to buy it. As they left, they took a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria left her phone number for further communication. Shortly after, she received a call from Jorge himself, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, the conversation turned to a more personal subject. Over the following days, Jorge contacted Luz Maria several times, gradually building up the courage to invite her to meet at a coffee shop. Jorge was clearly smitten with Luz Maria, the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he didn't know how to approach her. Luckily, Luz Maria also liked Jorge, and when he asked to meet, she happily agreed. Although Luz Maria was a year younger, their small age difference wasn't an issue. They fell deeply in love, both believing it was love at first sight and that a long, happy life was ahead. A few short months into their relationship, they decided to live together, despite parental objections. They had a small, private wedding, attended only by close friends and family. However, their special day almost got derailed due to a mishap at the banquet venue. They had to cough up extra cash to save the celebration, which wedding ultimately took place on schedule. Jorge was born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina, a town in central Guatemala. Jorge and his younger brother, Pablo, grew up in a low-income household. His family struggled financially, so as children, they did not have the luxury of fine clothes and expensive toys, as the family's limited income only covered the most basic needs. Even though Jorge grew up in difficult circumstances, he seemed to have no motivation to change his life for the better. He lived life at his own pace, choosing to enjoy simple pleasures rather than strive for advanced degrees or job security. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, unsociable, and having few close relationships, especially with women. When he met the love of his life, Luz Maria, he went all out to win her heart and quickly proposed, fearing she might change her mind. However, Luz Maria's parents, Al Morales and Brian, were suspicious of him from the start. They couldn't quite put their finger on what it was about him that they didn't like, but they couldn't convince their daughter to call off the wedding. The marriage turned out to be unhappy. After the wedding, Luz Maria became pregnant, but she had not yet finished her university degree and struggled to find a good job. Due to her lack of experience and health issues, she had to accept short-term, low-skilled jobs. Meanwhile, her husband lost his job and was in no hurry to find a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became more difficult. Both spouses were unemployed, and they had no money to pay rent, buy food, or pay for the family's basic needs. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that their only option was to temporarily move in with his parents. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but facing no alternative and having a baby to care for, she eventually gave her consent. Luz Maria's mother was aware of the problems her daughter was facing in her marriage, but despite mother concerns, Luz Maria was optimistic that things would improve. Luz Maria assured her mother that everything would get better soon, so her mother decided to visit her and see how she was doing. However, when she went to Luz Maria's husband's house to see her daughter, she was shocked by what she found. Luz Maria was in a terrible state, eating only once a day and very little at that. This was partly due to Jorge's family not providing her with enough food, even though she was unemployed and breastfeeding her young daughter. The lack of food was only one of many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly belittled and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was annoyed by the sound of the baby crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. On several occasions, he threw items at Luz Maria, including a baby bottle that hit her and her daughter, Alice, who was in her arms. Despite witnessing these events, Jorge just stood by and did nothing to protect his wife and children, he treating them as if they were strangers. Morales convinces her daughter to take her granddaughter to her maternal home. Jorge arrived shortly afterwards, asking his wife to return home and promising to find a job. Luz Maria agreed, on the condition that they could rent their own apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. After completing her education and defending her diploma, Luz Maria landed her dream job at the city prosecutor's office. As a smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began to advance in her career. As time passed, the family's financial situation significantly improved, thanks to Luz Maria's hard work and success. They were eventually able to afford a car. Meanwhile, Jorge continued to struggle with his own life, failing to find direction and instead relying on his wife's income. His laziness and jealousy intensified over time, causing tension in the household. Jorge had a volatile temper, and the situation worsened with time. Jorge was a man who preferred a life of leisure, spending most of his time at home watching TV, drinking beer with friends, and relying on his wife's income. He was extremely possessive and controlling, restricting his wife's freedom and autonomy. He wouldn't allow her to make friends, have lunch with colleagues, or even be alone without him. He constantly monitored her phone activity, checked her call history, and read her messages. He also forbade her from creating social media accounts. When they were alone at home, Jorge's behavior was just as bad. He frequently arguments, blamed his wife for all their problems, and never took responsibility for his actions. When they lived with his parents, Jorge failed to stand up for his wife, instead watching as she was humiliated, insulted, and even physically abused by his relatives. Jorge frequently resorted to physical violence in their relationship. He had a controlling attitude towards his wife, Luz Maria, and wrongly believed she would accept his abusive treatment. Their neighbors frequently heard screams coming from their house and witnessed signs of physical abuse on Luz Maria's face and body. Luz Maria had tried to leave her husband multiple times, taking their daughter and moving in with her parents. However, her husband would always show up, beg for forgiveness on his knees, and promise to change. Despite her parents' warnings to leave him, Luz Maria would forgive her husband and give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, After another violent argument, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter, Alice, fled to her mother's house in tears. The next day, Jorge arrived, but it was unclear whether he was seeking reconciliation with his wife or just wanted his car back. He claimed to have found a new job and promised that their lives would improve, swearing that he would never physically harm Luz Maria again. Luz Maria believed him once more and returned to their rented apartment with her husband. In January 2021, Jorge failed to get a job as promised and stole the money Luz Maria had earned, leaving their family with nothing. Luz Maria called her mother to complain, and her mother agreed to meet with her to give her some money until she received her next salary. However, on January 19th, Luz Maria failed to show up and was unreachable by phone, which was unusual for her. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Morales went to Luz Maria's workplace the next day and found that she had not shown up for 2 consecutive days and had not been in contact with anyone. Around the same time, Jorge was also looking for Luz Maria. He went to the prosecutor's office claiming they had a fight and assuming she had gone to her mother's house. However, Morales suspected that he was lying and immediately went to the police to report Luz Maria missing. That same day, a nationwide alert system was launched under the codename Isabel Claudina. This system was originally designed to facilitate urgent searches for missing young women. When the massive search began, her husband, Jorge, was immediately identified as the lead suspect. In fact, he was the only suspect. Luz Maria had no enemies, and there was no reason to believe she had been kidnapped. The last person to see her alive was Jorge himself. Jorge denied any involvement in Luz Maria's disappearance, claiming he had been searching for her and was outraged to be considered a suspect. Jorge's story had several holes in it, and he couldn't give a clear reason for not telling the police about his wife's disappearance on the same day it happened. If Jorge thought Luz Maria was at her mother's house, it wasn't clear why he didn't call or visit her there. On January 22nd, municipal workers stumbled upon the body of Luz Maria Lopez while responding to a clogged storm drain near the road. When they lifted the grate, they found a large plastic bag containing charred human remains. The workers immediately reported the discovery to the police, suspected that the body might be that of Luz Maria. Forensic experts confirmed that the remains belonged to she, and Luz Maria's parents and brother identified the body despite its severe disfigurement from fire. Notably, the body was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Despite the body's severe burns, pathologists determined that Luz Maria had been severely beaten and died from asphyxia. Evidence of internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was still alive, and caked blood in her nose and mouth supported this conclusion. Deep marks on her neck also indicated strangulation. At the time of the discovery of the body, no new suspects had emerged. Luz Maria's parents were convinced that their son-in-law, Jorge, was responsible for the brutal murder of their daughter. As a result, Jorge was immediately taken into custody, and investigators began to look into the motive behind the crime. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior were consulted to examine the relationships within the family and the marriage. During the investigation, Luz Maria's mother, Morales, provided an audio recording that had been sent to her anonymously by a neighbor who had witnessed their frequent arguments. The recording captured a heated argument between they, in which Luz Maria frantically screams and cries for help, accompanied by the faint sounds of a child crying in the background. Morales was deeply shocked and extremely upset by the news. She emphasized that if the witness had immediately contacted the police, her daughter might still be alive. The witness did not call the police or even visit the house where the screams originated. The police were unable to locate the anonymous person, which meant they could not be officially involved in the investigation. During an interview, Morales urged citizens to be vigilant and report instances of domestic violence to the police rather than simply documenting them. She believed that such actions could help save lives. The crime sparked widespread outrage, prompting thousands of people to take to the streets and demand justice for Luz Maria. Jorge was taken into custody, but he continued to deny his involvement, claiming he had driven his wife to work on the day she disappeared. Security footage did show their car heading in the direction of her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. Additionally, no footage showed the car stopping or Luz Maria getting out. At the house they was renting, police discovered evidence of a violent incident. There were faint blood stains and drag marks, suggesting that this was where the brutal attack had occurred. Further evidence was discovered in the trunk of the family car, where microscopic fragments of burnt human flesh were found. The investigators also became interested in a recent purchase made by a double orthopedic mattress. Specifically, they were interested in the dense polyethylene wrapping that came with the mattress. A comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to package the burnt remains of Luz Maria. Additionally, several neighbors came forward as witnesses, reporting that they had frequently heard Jorge yelling at his wife and threatening to kill her. Just days before Luz Maria's disappearance, Jorge had been overheard shouting that he would kill her if she tried to leave him, and that he would hide her body so well that no one would ever find it. Criminologists used collected data and witness testimony to reconstruct the events surrounding the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, a brutal murder took place. The day before, Luz Maria and her husband, Jorge, had a violent argument. Jorge physically assaulted her. On this occasion, his rage escalated, causing him to strike his wife multiple times. Her screams for help were heard by the neighbors, but they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The beating left Luz Maria with a broken nose and a head injury. Jorge then strangled her with his bare hands. In an attempt to dispose of the body, he dragged it to the backyard, doused it with flammable liquid, and set it on fire. However, the fire produced a significant amount of smoke and a strong odor, which Jorge feared would attract the attention of the neighbors. He quickly extinguished the flames, wrapped the charred remains in plastic, and sought a secluded location to hide the body, he believing it would never be discovered. Jorge committed a heinous crime in front of his 3.5-year-old daughter, who was old enough to partially understand what was happening. The child witnessed the beating and crime, and her cries and screams were recorded. Despite this, Jorge attempted to cover his tracks by using his knowledge of forensics, gained from his wife's textbooks, to create an alibi. He disposed of her body in a drainage sewer on a poorly lit road with no surveillance cameras. The next morning, Jorge drove to his wife's workplace, pretending to have taken her there as usual. He then began a fake search for her, contacting her colleagues, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers delayed proceedings and attempted to mislead the investigation. They claimed that all the evidence and witness statements were indirect and did not directly prove Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, arguing that he was deeply depressed due to the accusations of killing Luz Maria he loved and the mother of his child. However, the crucial evidence came from Luz Maria's phone, which was in Jorge's possession. On the day after the crime, he sent multiple messages from her phone to different people, attempting to make people believe that Luz Maria was still alive. An analysis of the phone's movements revealed that it was consistently in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense team attempted to spin this evidence in their favor, claiming that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city with it while searching for her. However, they failed to explain why Jorge was sending messages from her phone. Furthermore, bruises and scratches on Jorge's body, which were documented by experts through photographs, suggested that Luz Maria had put up a struggle. The most noticeable injury on Jorge was a scratch on his neck. However, investigators were unable to find Jorge's skin cells under Luz Maria's fingernails. Despite several questionable points in the case, the prosecutor pushed for the maximum possible sentence. The defendant was found guilty of brutally murdering his wife in October 2022. Jorge was sentenced to 50 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. The grandparents expressed that their granddaughter had given their lives new meaning. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive, and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters, and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steph, and is expecting their child. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chris Watts. Shanann and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen while Chris hailed from Spring Lake. On November 3, 2012, they got married, but not everyone was pleased with their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, did not attend the wedding due to Cindy's dislike of Shanann and the way she treated her son. A year after their wedding, Shanann and Chris made a significant decision to buy a new home in Frederick, Colorado. This marked a new chapter in their lives as they started fresh in their new home. After relocating to Colorado, the couple looked forward to starting a family. Their dream was realized on December 17, 2013, with the birth of their daughter, Bella Marie. 2 years later, on July 17, 2015, they welcomed their second daughter, Celeste Catherine, affectionately known as Cece. Shanann was diagnosed with lupus at a young age, a chronic autoimmune disease that affects various parts of the body. The immune system mistakenly attacks healthy cells and tissues, producing autoantibodies that target and destroy them, leading to inflammation and tissue damage. This diagnosis brought devastating news. It would be challenging for her to conceive and have children. Shanann had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and this revelation shattered her. However, she defied the odds, experiencing the incredible joy of motherhood, not once, but twice. Shanann was a warm and compassionate person who radiated kindness and positivity. Those who knew her described her as a loving and caring individual who made everyone feel welcome. She had a driven personality, always striving to create a better life for herself and her family. Her vibrant and warm nature effortlessly drew people to her. Shanann was an exceptional mother to her 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. Her love for them was boundless, and she cherished being a mother more than anything in the world. She was dedicated to providing for her children in every way possible, nurturing and supporting them unconditionally. Bella, the older sibling, was a caring and nurturing child who enjoyed taking care of her younger sister. Cece, on the other hand, was a lively and energetic child who brought joy and laughter to everyone's lives with her vibrant personality. Shanann's friends and family thought she had a perfect marriage, but they found Chris hard to get close to. Despite this, they welcomed him because Shanann was deeply in love with him. In 2015, Shanann and Chris filed for bankruptcy due to significant financial struggles. These included a large mortgage, car payments, loans, medical bills, and a substantial amount of credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, and Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. By 2016, Shanann had started a new career as a consultant for a multi-level marketing company. She sold a nutritional supplement called Thrive, which was administered through a patch. Shanann was extremely passionate about her job. According to a coworker, Cynthia DeRosette, everyone who met her was drawn to her energy. Shanann was happy with her life, husband, and 2 daughters, but she had one wish remaining: to have a baby boy to complete their family. In spring 2018, she got an unexpected but pleasant surprise when she found out she was pregnant for the 3rd time. This news filled her with excitement and anticipation. After further tests, Shanann discovered she was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris were overjoyed, and they chose to name their baby Nico. When Bella and Cece, Shannon's daughters, heard they were going to be big sisters, they were thrilled. During the summer of 2018, Shanann, who was pregnant with Nico at the time, visited her family in North Carolina, while Chris remained in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie. Despite her strained relationship with her in-laws, Shannon wanted her daughters to spend time with their grandparents. When they arrived, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece despite knowing about her peanut allergy, which Shannon had warned her about. Cindy still served Cece a snack containing peanuts, which deeply upset Shannon. She felt that Cindy had recklessly endangered Cece's life. While visiting family in North Carolina, Shannon noticed a strange change in Chris's communication with her. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and puzzled. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to new employees, but assured her it was nothing to worry about. On July 31st, Chris flew from Colorado to North Carolina to spend the week with Shannon and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were thrilled to see their dad, and as Chris stepped off the plane, they rushed to him, beaming with excitement. Chris hugged them tightly, but his greeting to Shannon was different. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shannon felt deeply hurt by Chris's distant behavior and was unable to hide her emotions. She texted a friend, confessing her growing concern and sadness. She felt like Chris had changed somehow, and she barely recognized the man she had married. Her words were filled with a mix of sorrow and confusion. Shannon texted her friend to say that her husband Chris was refusing to talk to her, even though they were in the same room. Instead of speaking directly, they were communicating through their phones. Shannon shared a photo with her friend that showed her and Chris sitting on separate couches facing away from each other. In her texts, Shannon confided in her friend that she suspected Chris might be interested in someone else. Her friend was shocked and insisted that Chris would never do that, given how much he loved Shannon. In a heartfelt message to her friend, Shannon revealed that Chris had confessed to her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This revelation left Shannon stunned, as she had always believed their love was strong. Chris had made things even more difficult for Shannon by admitting that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings for her. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. Shannon was devastated to hear this, as she valued their relationship and believed their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacles. Determined to rescue her family, Shannon proposed that she and Chris attend couples therapy together, aware that their relationship was struggling and hoping that a professional could help them get through their problems. However, Chris refused point blank. Shannon was prepared to make sacrifices and do everything possible to save their relationship, but she quickly came to realize that Chris was unwilling to meet her halfway. Despite her best attempts, Shannon understood that there was nothing Chris was willing to compromise on, and this made her efforts futile. After returning home to Colorado from a trip to North Carolina, Shannon, Chris, and their daughters settled back into their normal routine. However, Shannon's stay was short-lived as she soon embarked on another trip to Arizona for business. During her time in Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. Instead of being her usual cheerful self, she seemed confused, upset, and distressed. One evening in their hotel room, Shannon confided in her friends about her concerns. On August 11th, while Shannon was with her friends in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone showing a charge on her and Chris's account from a restaurant. Although this wasn't unusual, the amount of the bill raised concerns. Shannon wondered why it was so high and suspected that Chris might be dining with another woman. This suspicion left her feeling uneasy and uncertain. Shannon returned home from her business trip around 1:48 a.m. on August 13th. Her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. The doorbell camera footage showed Shannon entering her house at that time. Shannon's friends were worried when she failed to send her usual good morning messages. They knew she had a crucial appointment at the OBGYN at 9:30 a.m., which she would never miss. However, when she also missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became extremely concerned. Nicole was convinced something was amiss when no one had heard from Shannon all day. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Feeling a growing sense of urgency, Nicole decided to drive to Shannon's house. As she approached the house, her anxiety spiked. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes were by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shannon would come out and explain that she had overslept and was tired from her previous day's flight. But Shannon didn't respond. Chris was contacted by one of Shannon's friends who were unable to reach her. He told them not to worry, saying she might be at a friend's house with their daughters. However, this confused Shannon's friends, since they were all in touch with each other and none knew where she was. Shannon didn't have plans to meet any of them. When her friends threatened to report Shannon and the girls missing to the Frederick Police Department, Chris didn't want to involve the police. Despite this, Nicole, worried about her friend, called 911 to report Shannon, Bella, and Cece missing. After Nicole contacted the police, an officer from the Frederick Police Department responded to Shannon and Chris's residence. The officer's body camera footage showed Nicole was visibly distraught over her missing friend. As Nicole was providing every detail she knew about Shannon and her daughters, Chris arrived at the house. Chris exited his vehicle and approached the officer, but it was apparent he didn't share Nicole's level of concern, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During the search of Shannon and Chris's house, the officer found Shannon's purse. Inside, the officer discovered medication prescribed to Shannon and her two daughters. This discovery further alarmed Nicole, but Chris remained calm. The officer also located Shannon's wedding band on the bedside table. The officer and Chris visited a neighbor to review footage from their security camera, which captured part of Shannon and Chris's driveway and garage. The footage showed Chris opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the home at 5:28 a.m. As they watched the TV footage, Chris's demeanor began to shift. He grew nervous and fidgety, seemingly uncomfortable with what he was seeing on screen. Even his neighbor noticed Chris's strange behavior. When Chris left the house, the neighbor discreetly confided in the officer, expressing doubts about Chris's behavior, stating that he didn't think Chris was acting normally. Concerned about Shannon's well-being, her friends wanted to launch a search for Bella and Cece immediately. However, Chris vetoed the idea, warning them against joining the search. His lack of concern for his wife and daughters deeply troubled Shannon's friends, who couldn't understand his apathy. Officers went door to door in Shannon and Chris's neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or noticed anything unusual. The next day, the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search for Shannon, Bella, and Cece. The Boulder Police Department also provided cadaver dogs to search the property and house. As officers searched the home, a handler commented that the house smelled of cleaning solutions and looked unusually clean, which raised suspicions. The presence of cleaning solutions suggested that someone might be trying to conceal evidence or clean up potential clues. Chris gave an interview outside his home while it was being searched, saying he and Shannon had an emotional conversation before she left, but no argument. He made a heartfelt plea for their return, but came across as aloof and unemotional, sparking suspicion. On August 14th, Special Agent Coder conducted an interview with Chris. During this interview, Chris shared his theory that Shannon might have taken the girls to a friend's house to relax and unwind given the situation. Meanwhile, the police station was flooded with tips about potential sightings of Shannon and the girls, including various photographs. However, when asked to identify any of the individuals in the photos as his missing wife and daughters, Chris was unable to do so. Agent Coder also inquired about Chris and Shannon's marriage. Chris asserted that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and, to the best of his knowledge, Shannon had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the kind of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt the urge to stray. Throughout the interview, Agent Coder observed Chris's unusual behavior, specifically his frequent hand movements towards his neck. This caught Agent Coder's attention and sparked his suspicion. leading him to wonder if these movements might be indicative of something more significant. During the interview, Agent Coder stepped out briefly to share his suspicion with the other officers that Chris might have strangled Shannon. As more time passed without any sign of Shannon or her daughters, worry and despair deepened among their loved ones. Despite their growing doubts about Shannon's safety, they clung to the hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. Chris was released from the police department after 3 hours of questioning. However, the authorities asked him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test, and he agreed. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and drove to the Frederick Police Department. Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the polygraph test. During the test, Chris denied knowing Shannon's whereabouts and claimed he had no role in her disappearance. He didn't pass the test, leaving detectives convinced of his involvement in the disappearance and deaths of his wife and daughters. However, they still needed to persuade him to confess. The special agent, Tammy Lee, a highly skilled coder and polygraph expert, confronted Chris about his failed polygraph test results. Chris admitted that he had not physically harmed Shannon, but acknowledged that he had caused her emotional suffering. Additionally, he confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. Chris expressed remorse for his infidelity, stating that he had never intended to engage in such behavior. However, he denied any involvement in the disappearance of his family. During the interview, Chris asked to speak with his father, Ronnie. The officers were initially hesitant, worried that allowing Ronnie into the room would prompt Chris to request legal representation. Despite their reservations, they allowed it, hoping Ronnie's presence might persuade Chris to confess. In the interrogation room, Chris confessed to killing Shannon, claiming he did it because she had supposedly harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, Shannon's friends were certain Chris was lying, knowing that Shannon would never hurt her children, whom she loved deeply and was eager to welcome her new son, Nico. Chris admitted to burying Shannon's body in a shallow grave at one of his work sites and disposing of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite being arrested and taken into custody, he persisted in denying any harm to them. The detectives didn't believe for a second that Shannon had harmed her daughters. Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing, the judge made a bold statement about the heinous crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had encountered in his career, despite having dealt with thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shannon in their bed. He had strangled her after she confronted him about his extramarital affair and threatened to take their daughters away. He then put her body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. There, Chris claimed to have killed his daughters, one by one, in a horrific sequence of events, where one daughter was forced to witness her sister's death before meeting the same fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stephen Freeman. The victim, Stephen Andrew Freeman, was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up as happy, healthy children without any problems with their parents or society. Kind and responsive, Stephen had many friends, and everyone described him as an exceptionally calm and balanced person. Stephen grew up in Griffin, where he later attended Spalding High School and Gordon State College to complete his education. Mary Catherine Higdon was also raised in a respectable family, somewhat carefree, impetuous, humorous, and friendly. She was drawn to creativity. She often put on mini plays and performed them in front of her family and neighbors. Mary and Stephen fell in love with each other in their senior years and have been inseparable since. The young couple had a lot of common interests. Both loved being in nature. They went hiking, fishing, and even hunting together. In 2012, Stephen Freeman updated his Facebook status to indicate he was in a relationship and regularly shared various photos with his partner. Mary's family was fond of her boyfriend, and Steve's parents also accepted his girlfriend as their own daughter. After graduating from school, the young couple moved in together. Stephen got a job as a plumber at Drain W Gutters and Roofing Inc., and Mary Catherine worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School. She also worked part-time as a sales associate at a gun store. By the summer of 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years but had not gotten married. On August 1st, 2018 at 10:42 p.m., emergency services received an alarm call. The caller, 24-year-old Mary Catherine Higdon, screamed hysterically into the phone that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. She reported grabbing a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that there was a bullet in the chamber. When paramedics and police arrived at Sunnybrook Drive, she was in a state of shock. She knelt in front of the motionless and bloodied body of the young man lying on the bed, crying incessantly, gasping and begging the doctors to help him. "I can't lose him. I can't lose him," she cried. Law enforcement officers struggled to pull Mary Catherine away from the victim to examine him and provide first aid. 23-year-old Stephen Freeman, wounded in the chest just below the neck, was still breathing. He was immediately transported to Spalding Regional Hospital. Unfortunately, a few minutes before midnight, the young man's heart stopped. Not fully comprehending the tragedy that had occurred and still in shock, Mary had to visit the police station to give her account of the events. She was called in for questioning, where she, still completely stunned, claimed that the shot was accidental. She explained that there had always been firearms in their home, and that Stephen would leave a pistol on the nightstand for self-defense before going to sleep, as their house was located outside the city. On that fateful evening, she merely wanted to hand Stephen the pistol, and it accidentally discharged. She had no idea the gun was loaded. Mary Catherine insisted that Stephen Freeman was the love of her life, and she would never harm him, especially not intentionally. Examining the scene, investigators did not rule out the possibility that the act might have been premeditated, and they had substantial arguments to support this theory. There were signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered about. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story improbable and continued the investigation, examining the evidence. Mary Catherine was called in for a second interrogation, where the investigators used aggressive tactics. They yelled at her, expressed skepticism about her account, and demanded the truth. This approach was effective, and Mary Catherine confessed to shooting her boyfriend in a fit of anger. She explained that they had a heated argument, and she wanted to leave him. The investigators had recorded the conversation and obtained a confession, indicating a case that had been resolved. However, a significant technical issue arose, resulting in the loss of most of the recording, with only background interference and indistinct noises remaining. The reason for this loss and the lack of a backup copy of this crucial evidence remained unexplained. Further investigation revealed that the pistol could not have been fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Additionally, for the bullet to have struck Stephen in the way it did, the pistol had to have been pointed directly at the victim. Detectives also closely examined Mary's behavior, with some suspecting that she may have been overacting and exaggerating her distress. The detectives remained diligent, carefully piecing together their theory of the tragedy based on the emerging evidence and proof. Another critical fact cast doubt on the accident in Mary Catherine's words. Investigators learned that she worked at a gun store, where employees undergo thorough training on handling various firearms before starting work. This meant she undoubtedly knew how to safely hand over a pistol without causing harm. The picture of an accident didn't align with the new facts that the investigation uncovered. She changed her statement several times, and her hysterical state sometimes interrupted the interrogation. However, she reiterated that it was an accident. In another conversation, Mary Catherine told the police that at Stephen's request, she tossed the pistol to hand it to him, and the weapon accidentally discharged. This did not match what she had told the investigators at the scene and during the first interrogation, where she repeatedly stated that she was simply handing Stephen the pistol hand to hand, not tossing it, and that's when it accidentally fired below his neck. These changing statements worked against Mary Catherine as she was caught lying, and every word was scrutinized for hidden intent, indicating guilt or concealment. Mary was detained and held in the Spalding County Jail during her trial. She was charged with felony murder, malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm while committing a crime. Lieutenant Wilson strongly disputed Mary's claim that it was an accident and tried to prove that her actions were a deliberate and meticulously planned act. A new piece of evidence in this case was common cooking grease found on the slide of the pistol. The slide also had lubricant, suggesting that at some point the magazine must have been emptied, bullets were loaded, and the pistol was then placed on a shelf. In her defense, Mary Catherine told the police that she was indeed preparing dinner for Stephen that evening, and the dinner found scattered on the kitchen floor explained the presence of grease on the slide. Subsequent interrogations of the couple's relatives and friends did not provide the clarity expected in this case. Many friends claimed that this teenage love turned into a roller coaster ride for Stephen and Mary, until their relationship nearly ended and then reignited with new passion. It became genuinely complicated in recent years. The lovers often argued over emerging disagreements. Mary turned every argument into a dramatic event, screaming at Stephen and attacking him, after which he often left the house to spend the night with friends, turning off his phone as Mary continued to call and text him. She tried to control his every move, driving Stephen to frustration. The guy shared with friends that during arguments and fights, Mary pointed a pistol at him or herself, threatening to end her life or his. Stephen never reported this to the police, fearing Mary would be jailed. And this was not the only instance when Mary resorted to using a weapon. There were plenty of weapons in their home. During an interrogation, Stephen's friend Thomas Skinner shared that 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, Stephen and Mary Catherine exchanged warm messages, wishing each other a good day. The next day, July 31st, Stephen told his mother that he would not return home to that devil, and stayed the night at Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home to sleep, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. That evening, she prepared dinner and waited for her beloved. From Stephen's mother, she learned he was at his friend Thomas's place and went to pick him up. She encountered them on the road and, rolling down the window, shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. The evening, instead of a reconciliatory dinner, ended in tragedy. The police believed the case was closed as a premeditated act driven by Mary Catherine's anger. However, her defense team revealed another side to the young couple's life known to few. On June 17, 2019, almost a year after Stephen's death, his beloved Mary Catherine Higdon stood trial. Before the hearing, Mary Higdon was offered a plea deal for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole if she pleaded guilty. However, she refused the deal, insisting she could never harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. At the initial hearings, Mary Higdon defended herself vehemently, repeatedly claiming it was an accident and that she loved Stephen Freeman. She also surprised many by accusing her boyfriend of abusive behavior towards her, claiming he hit her twice and even forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy, and she had to defend herself. It turned out the couple's relationship had been deteriorating over some time. Friends and relatives claimed Mary Higdon was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. She demanded attention and pursued him, especially insistently lately. Allegedly, on the night of the incident, when Stephen Freeman finally came home, he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him, which became the last straw for her. She couldn't hold back and shot at him. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard stated in court that physical evidence supported the claim that Mary Catherine shot Stephen in anger after he didn't come home for dinner, and ignored her calls and text messages. The evidence presented included the grease found on the pistol and the sheet taken from the mattress, where Stephen lay bleeding. The sheet was shown as a key piece of evidence, indicating that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still in one spot. Forensic experts examined the blood stains and determined that at the moment of the shot, Stephen was not moving or approaching Mary Catherine, but was calmly sitting on the bed. If he had been moving, the blood would have been everywhere, not just in one corner of the sheet. This only confirmed that the accused's theory was once again false. In court, faced directly with the possibility of life imprisonment, and finally believing in the gravity of the situation, Mary Catherine made the risky decision to provide truthful testimony. With tears in her eyes, in front of the judge and numerous attendees, she once again portrayed Stephen Freeman as a harsh and controlling tyrant and presented specific evidence. She managed to do so, and the defense stuck to the self-defense narrative. They presented the argument that a scandal had erupted between Mary and Stephen on the evening of the tragedy, where Mary fired at him in self-defense. Mary Catherine sorrowfully shared numerous stories from her life, where Stephen had hurt her. She confessed he had repeatedly hit her face, shaken her, and threatened punishment for any minor misconduct or disobedience. Living with Stephen, she experienced all kinds of imaginable pressure: verbal insults, physical attacks, and even assault. He constantly controlled and manipulated her, needing to know where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, how she was spending money, and even what she was eating. He drove her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. She never reported him to the police because she loved and feared him. The defense presented ample evidence to support their claims. This included not just text messages taken from Mary's old phone, but also correspondence that raised significant questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in this relationship. The text messages, dating back over a year and a half between Mary and Stephen, not only proved Stephen's harsh behavior towards Mary Catherine, but also Mary's infidelity. Some message excerpts showed Stephen insulting Mary Catherine with harsh words and threatening her with repercussions upon his return from fishing. However, the reason for his anger was that, as confirmed by his friends, he was very angry with his girlfriend for being unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine shared that Stephen had sexually assaulted her twice, and she feared he would harm her again on August 1st, 2018, leading her to act in self-defense. The defense called an expert witness and close relatives of Mary who could attest to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, testified affirmatively, stating she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting. She expressed regret for not photographing the injuries and believing Mary's explanation that it happened accidentally. A tearful Mary Higdon explained to the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to break up with Stephen, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became angry and attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand and accidentally fired. After Mary Catherine's emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense engaged in a fierce battle with Stephen's former friends who had been close to Mary for years, desperately trying to idealize their deceased friend. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described the victim as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. He claimed that over the last few years, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic, with her threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her, and on one occasion, pointing a pistol at her head in front of him. Another witness, Stephen's co-worker Alicia Varela, testified that Mary Catherine would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. In Mary's supposedly truthful court testimony, where she framed the shooting as self-defense, she omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard pointed out. Mary extensively discussed their troubled relationship and how, after years of harmony, it had deteriorated into physical abuse. However, she never mentioned the moment when she pulled the trigger in supposed self-defense. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard remained unconvinced by Mary's account, noting that during cross-examination, Mary never once mentioned any harsh treatment by Stephen. Repeatedly, the prosecutor asked Mary Catherine whether a woman feeling safe at home would pursue her assailant late at night to bring him back. The answer was unsatisfactory, and the prosecutor continued, vividly describing the accidental shooting. Kate Lenhard picked up the pistol and recreated the scene as she envisioned it. According to her theory, Stephen came home, and after hearing Mary out, they argued, and he refused to have dinner. Enraged, Mary scattered the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen, trying to avoid further conflict, went to the bedroom and sat on the bed, likely waiting for her to calm down. But Mary, ready for confrontation, called out to him twice without receiving a response, walked into the bedroom, and shot him in the neck on the left side. Since he hadn't turned to face her in her closing arguments, Kate Lenhard reminded the jury of the various stories and versions that kept changing at every police interrogation and court hearing. Mary Catherine Higdon spared no details in her emotional testimony about the alleged abuse from Stephen Freeman. But before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard desperately pleaded to consider this story not as a case of self-defense, but as a case of extreme manipulation. Despite the lost confession recording, the prosecution presented other evidence and counter-arguments. The forensic examination proved that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the moment of the shooting, hence he couldn't have been attacking Mary Higdon. Mary claimed they kept the gun in the house unloaded, but detectives suspected that the pistol was indeed loaded in advance on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. This was the only explanation for how grease marks not only got on part of the slide but also inside the pistol. Did Mary Catherine really load the pistol in advance? Colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and acquaintances of Stephen Freeman unanimously testified that he was not prone to aggression. Prosecutors also pointed out that Mary Catherine Higdon changed details of her story at least 10 times since the first interrogation, attributing such changes to fear. Mary Catherine refused a plea deal as she could have been facing the death penalty. The wait for the verdict felt like an eternity to her. After hearing all witnesses and the accused, the case was handed over to the jury. Just 10 minutes later, the jury was ready to announce their decision. However, 2 jurors out of 10 had doubts about some aspects of the prosecution's story. They were concerned that investigators, so eager to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated action, had not fully checked crucial facts. Questions were raised about the lack of a complete investigation into Stephen Freeman's phone, checking his text messages and browsing history. The prosecution simply hadn't done this. Besides Mary's lies, no sufficient evidence was presented against her. The arguments presented by jurors Victor and Chris had an effect. The jury deliberated and returned a unanimous verdict, not guilty. A few hours later, Mary Catherine Higdon was free. After a lengthy deliberation, the 12 jurors concluded the following. The defendant was found not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and not guilty on the second charge of serious action. When the judge acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon on all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime, many people in the courtroom were shocked, watching the person who took her son's life walk out of the courtroom. Jennifer Freeman could barely contain her anger towards the jurors, and everyone who supported Stephen's family was also stunned by such a verdict. After the trial ended in her favor, Mary Catherine returned home to be with her family in Griffin. Since then, she has stayed out of the limelight and is almost absent from social media, likely to avoid undue attention from the media and the public. Her Instagram profile is private, and no further details about her current whereabouts are known. It's assumed that Mary Catherine has moved on from her harrowing past to live a quiet and unnoticeable life. Stephen Freeman's mother dedicated a farewell post to her son on social media. Stephen lived a life filled with love, joy, compassion, and loyalty. Everyone was his friend, and those who enjoyed hunting and fishing with him were his closest. He had a heart of gold and a charming southern smile. Stephen showed his love for you by making you feel like you were the only person in the world, making you laugh until your stomach hurt, always smiling broadly, hugging you, and never leaving your side. These 3 simple words, "I love you," have always inspired me. So who really pulled the trigger in this story? That's a question you must answer for yourself, as all the answers in this story are evident by analyzing and presenting the situation. It's up to everyone to decide whether Mary Catherine is guilty or if it was a tragic accident that cost a young man his life. How much do you agree with the 2 jurors who changed the course of a young woman's life, giving her a second chance? Mary Catherine likely lives a quiet life away from the spotlight now that she has managed to leave her terrible past behind. Escape to death. In 2003, this high-profile story shook the whole of Brazil and was widely covered by the international media. Hundreds of law enforcers, rescuers, and volunteers from among those who cared about the story were searching for the young couple who disappeared in the forests of Embu Guaçu province. They had hoped to find them alive, but unfortunately those hopes were not realized, and the last days of the young people turned into a real nightmare. But grief-stricken members of the families of the missing ahead awaited another ordeal when the main criminal, rapist, torturer, and brutal killer was not punished, moreover, found himself in better conditions than he lived before. Who are Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Café? Liana Bay Friedenbach was born in São Paulo in May 1987. The girl was the eldest of 2 children at her parents. She grew up in a fairly well-known and wealthy family. The head of the family, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a very respected man in the city. Felipe Silva Café was also a native of São Paulo, where he was born in July 1984. But he was brought up in a rather modest, large family. From childhood used to work part-time, tried to provide for himself independently, and help his relatives. Young people met as school children. Between them, there was a friendship, which grew into mutual sympathy and the first youthful love, but they had to hide it in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious people. They brought up their daughter in strictness. She attended Sunday school from an early age and regularly went to church. Father and mother were categorically against her romantic relationships at such a young age. In addition, social inequality also played a significant role in this matter, because the girl, as I have already said, was from a wealthy family, and her chosen one was poor. But the prohibitions of parents did not force the young people to part. They simply began to hide their affair, secretly arranging dates in different places where no one could see them, in order to spend at least a little time together. One last trip. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to get away from everyone for a while, taking a trip to a remote, deserted area to be alone for a while. They carefully prepared for the trip, which was to be an exciting adventure for them. And above all, the boys took care of a plausible alibi that would justify their absence and would not arouse suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Liana, on the other hand, could think of nothing better to say than that she was going on a sightseeing trip with the guys from church. She knew for sure that this excuse would work and her parents would let her go, no questions asked. The Friedenbach and Café families believed the stories made up by the teenagers and let their children go to their deaths without worrying about anything. Liana and Felipe were unspeakably happy. They could enjoy each other's company for a whole week without fear of inhibitions and censure from their parents. The young people decided to go to a picturesque province called Embu Guaçu. They took with them a tent, sleeping bags, some personal belongings, and a small stock of provisions. But the couple had practically no money, and this caused some difficulties. Being students, they had the right to free public transportation, so the guys thought out and calculated their route in advance to get to their destination by bus. Early in the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed place, taking care that no one who knew them could see them together. They took the first bus, and after reaching another city in the late evening, they spent the night right in the bus station. Then 2 more transports took them to their desired location. From there, They had to walk a few kilometers to a deserted place, hidden in the woods, where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone with each other. The day was warm and sunny, and the young people, in spite of their fatigue after the long journey, were in good spirits, joking, laughing, and making plans for their little vacation. When they reached the place marked on the map, they began to set up their modest but cozy camp. Uninvited guests. When Liana and Felipe traveled to such a remote and secluded place, they did not take into account the fact that in those areas reigns poverty, against which crime thrives. So the appearance of well-dressed young men with large backpacks and bags did not go unnoticed. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of local bandits fishing near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marques, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Ciampino. The latter was only 16 years old, but he was already the leader of the gang he organized. The criminals were interested in strangers, especially they liked a beautiful young girl. In addition, they decided that in their backpacks there was something to gain, and they could rob them. The bandits stealthily followed the guys and began to watch, lurking in the thickets. The lovers set up a tent, had a snack, and then began to beautify the place of their parking lot. The intruders sat in ambush until they were sure that no one else would join the young men, and they had no weapons on them. Pernambuco and Ciampino then attacked Liana and Felipe, threatening them, and the latter, frightened, did not even try to run away or fight back against the unknown assailants. Having searched all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing that could interest them. Then the bandits decided that they could demand ransom for the boy and the girl from their relatives. Liana, who was scared to death, immediately confirmed that she was from a rich family, and her father would give them as much money as they asked for. The criminals were happy about this turn, but since they had no experience in such cases, they did not know how to organize everything in order to stay with the money and free in the end. Prisoners. While the plan was maturing, and the bandits were trying to figure out who they had in their hands and how much they could ask for their lives, they decided to hide the prisoners so they couldn't escape. Initially, they were taken to a dilapidated structure near the very farm where the boys were staying, but there were no windows or doors. It was soon decided to bring the pair to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and severely beaten so that he could not make an escape and offer no resistance. That same night, all the gang members took turns taking advantage of the bound and helpless girl, finally breaking her morally. The criminals could not figure out how to demand and collect the ransom, so they simply decided to get rid of the captives and hide their bodies somewhere in the woods so that they would never be found. After torturing the boys, the next day they were taken to a deserted place in the woods. The half-dead Felipe, Pernambuco, took them deep into the forest, from where a shot was heard, and then the bandit returned alone. Liana realized what had happened, and that her beloved was no longer alive, although the kidnappers tried to assure her that they had released the young man. They had other plans for the beautiful young Liana. The scoundrels wanted to keep her as a plaything until they got bored with her, especially since no one had started looking for the missing boys at that time. A couple of days after her daughter's departure, her parents found out that there was no excursion trip with the guys from the church, and Liana's friends don't know where she went. The Friedenbach family guessed that their heiress had run off with her boyfriend and immediately contacted his parents to find out where their children might be. But Cafe's family was sure their son had gone camping with his buddies, so there was nothing they could do to help locate the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither of the young men had been in touch for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to his connections and money, Henri put on their feet literally all the police in the city. Step by step, bit by bit, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after they had run away from home by trickery. The police soon reached Embu-Guaçu, but the boys got off their last bus, and further their way lay through a deserted wooded area. It was also there that their phones were last online. A large-scale search began, involving police officers, rescuers, and just concerned people who, having learned about the incident, decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the operation, providing his personal helicopter to search from the air and spreading leaflets with photos of the missing young people. Their camp was found quite quickly, and it looked frightening. Despite the lack of signs of blood and fighting, it was clear that something terrible had happened here. The couple's personal belongings had been turned out of their bags and carelessly scattered. The tent had been opened from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' cell phones were lying around. Scouring every mile, rescuers soon discovered Felipe's breathless body. The tied-up guy had been shot in the back of the head almost at point-blank range, so he had no chance of being rescued. It became clear that the probability of finding Liana alive is minimal, but hope, as they say, dies last. Henry Friedenbach involved the press in the search, making sure that the whole process was widely covered in the media, and as many people as possible learned about it. For any information about Liana's whereabouts, an impressive reward was announced, but it did not help the case: the massacre of Liana. After the criminals got rid of Felipe, they brought Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. By then, the bandits had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gaetano da Silva and Agnaldo Pires. Ciampino proudly announced to them that Liana was his property and could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to fulfill their dirtiest fantasies with Liana, and his offer was immediately accepted. A day later, after learning about the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to change their location and moved with the victim to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another member of the gang. In the evening of the same day, they went fishing, taking Liana with them. The ringleader threw his jacket over her because it was chilly outside, and he decided to show concern in this way. In the evening, the older brother of Ciampino, whom the juvenile delinquent had not told about his affairs, came to the same place. Ciampino told his brother that Liana was his lover, but he immediately recognized her as the wanted girl. He took his brother aside and said that his captive was being actively sought, so that the police were literally following them. Ciampino took his brother's words as a sign and a call to action. He decided that it was urgent to get rid of Liana and then run away and lay low. He lied to Liana, saying that she was free and he would lead her to the road. In fact, the bandit led his victim into the forest, where he brutally killed her with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was not found until 5 days after the massacre. There was literally no life on her. She was very badly mutilated. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The criminals were incredibly cruel, cynical, and ruthless, but at the same time, as stupid and short-sighted. They did not try to run or hide, did not bother to destroy the physical evidence, and at the same time believed that no one would ever find them. This naive self-confidence of the bandits helped the police quickly identify them and apprehend all members of the criminal gang. Ciampino, as I have already said, left his jacket on the victim's body, which had his sweat marks on it. In addition, he brought the murder weapon to his house, washed it, and hid it in the yard, while he tried to wash the clothes with traces of the murdered girl's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, it was possible to identify the gang members who had committed violence against Liana. All the gang members were apprehended almost simultaneously. The ringleader not only did not deny it, but immediately began to testify, boasting that it was he who had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. He described in detail everything that had happened to Liana in the last days of her life. Following a lengthy trial, almost all of the adult members of the criminal gang received fairly harsh sentences. Hernan Buca was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Felipe. Antonio Gaetano da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Pires, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture the victim, but provided the gang with his house where it all took place. However, with the ringleader and the most brutal member of the gang, everything was not so simple. At the time of his crimes, he himself was barely 16 years old. For this reason, the guy was sent to a specialized prison for minors with a fairly mild regime. Ciampino made several escape attempts, behaved aggressively and inadequately, because of which he was appointed a psychiatric examination. He was found to have several mental abnormalities, which in themselves were not something dangerous, but in the sum gave a monstrous result, turning the young man into a sophisticated sadist and murderer without feelings of pity or remorse. After such a diagnosis, the criminal was transferred to a closed-type medical institution, where he was to undergo compulsory treatment and rehabilitation. No further punishment was ever achieved for him, despite numerous appeals filed by the families of the murdered young men. As a result, Ciampino ended up in better conditions than he had been in before the crime. He now had his own private, cozy room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He has a balanced 4 meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is being held. His monthly maintenance is estimated at about $12,000. That's about $2,500. In recent years, the perpetrator has regularly petitioned for his release, noting that he has undergone a full course of treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. This is a monstrous story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. On the morning of August 31, 2003, the lifeless body of 22-year-old Katie Sepich was discovered near a remote landfill in the desert of Las Cruces, New Mexico. She had last been seen by friends as she left a local house party following a night of bar hopping. It would take almost 4 years to identify her killer. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was described by her mom as outspoken, vivacious, and intelligent. She grew up in Carlsbad, New Mexico, as the oldest of 3 siblings. After graduating with a business degree from New Mexico State University, she was planning to start graduate school in the fall to pursue her MBA. At the time, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. Katie was an extremely outgoing individual who formed a close bond with a guy named Joe Bischoff while attending university. Initially, their connection was platonic, but it soon blossomed into romance. Katie confided in her mother, Jeanne, about her deep-seated happiness with Joe and her desire to forge a long-term partnership with him. A short while later, Joe presented her with a diamond engagement ring. After graduating from university in the summer of 2003, Katie and Joe's relationship faced challenges. While Katie opted to pursue further studies at the university, Joe moved back to his parents' place in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city approximately 350 miles away from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to depart. Although their long-distance relationship was extremely challenging, they still found ways to reunite occasionally. During the Labor Day weekend of 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces, and Katie was ecstatic. Sadly, their brief time together took a tragic turn. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie spent the evening with Joe and their friends, bar hopping before heading to a local house party. However, after the party, Katie vanished. The following day, Katie's mom, Jan, received a life-changing phone call. As a mother, Jane cherished Katie, her remarkable, outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent daughter, who always lit up the room with her infectious laughter. Katie's roommate was on the other end of the line, desperately seeking Jane's help in locating Katie, having already contacted all her friends and local hospitals, but to no avail, with no sign of Katie anywhere. Veronica, who shared a room with Katie, informed Jana that Katie had departed from the party by herself that evening. Although Veronica and Joe had assumed Katie had gone home, they fell asleep at the party venue, only to discover the next morning that she was missing. Katie's family subsequently contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a partially clothed female body was found near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers who responded to the scene determined that the body had been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the woman's death was not accidental. The victim was estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, and her partial nudity, from the waist down, suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. She had defensive wounds on her arms, suggesting she fought back against her attacker and scratched them in the process. The police found skin cells from the assailant under her fingernails, which provided a crucial DNA sample. There were also signs of strangulation on her neck, indicating this was likely the cause of her death. Despite this, there was no evidence of a struggle at the scene where the body was found, leading investigators to believe she died elsewhere. It appeared the killer moved her body to the remote desert landfill in an attempt to delay its discovery. On the victim's body, another shocking discovery was made. Burn marks were found on her arms and back. These marks suggested that the perpetrator attempted to either dispose of the body or destroy evidence, and in doing so, they intentionally set the victim on fire. The police quickly linked Katie's disappearance to the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father then went to the mortuary to identify the body. According to Katie's mother, Jeanne, after a few hours of agonizing uncertainty, their worst fears were confirmed. The body was indeed Katie's. The pain was overwhelming, and they were consumed by grief. They felt trapped in a desperate situation with no escape, as if all happiness and hope had been lost, leaving no future ahead. Katie's father was required to identify the body of his beloved daughter. He later recounted to the investigators that when they pulled back the sheet, revealing her bruised and contorted face, he was overcome with emotion, dropped to his knees, and prayed to God to take his own life, overwhelmed by grief. The residents of Las Cruces, once a peaceful place, were left horrified by the traumatic event that befell Katie. With a sense of urgency, the police launched an extensive investigation to apprehend the perpetrator as quickly as possible, largely driven by the fear that this individual might strike again. To better understand Katie's case, the police started by reconstructing the final hours of her life. They sought to establish her whereabouts, her companions, and her activities during that time, as well as whether she had any altercations or enemies. Since the party venue was approximately a mile from Katie's home, the police had to ascertain whether she had managed to return home safely. The investigators' first interviews were with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe, her boyfriend. It struck them as odd that these two had stayed at the party while Katie had departed alone in the middle of the night. Joe displayed a lack of willingness to cooperate with the police, stating that Katie had left the party of her own accord and had intentionally left behind her purse, phone, and keys. The detectives thoroughly examined Katie's route, conducting a door-to-door inquiry and speaking with local residents. But regrettably, no one witnessed or overheard anything unusual. A promising lead indicated that Katie had arrived at her house but failed to enter, as she had departed without her keys. The investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and its surroundings, discovering Katie's shoes outside her bedroom window. It seemed that she had attempted to re-enter the house through the window, but was suddenly attacked. The footprints in the gravel beside the house supported this theory. Katie had put up a fierce fight for her life, but unfortunately, her attacker proved to be stronger. The investigators proposed that after killing Katie, the perpetrator transported her body to the desert landfill and attempted to burn it. They started questioning whether the perpetrator was a stranger or someone Katie knew and trusted. Since around 40 people had attended the party, the investigators looked into the possibility that someone might have trailed Katie when she went home and attacked her, possibly even her boyfriend Joe. When the police questioned Joe again, they told him they were aware that he and Katie had a dispute because she caught him kissing another girl. Joe confirmed this was true and stated that after Katie left, he followed her in his car, but he didn't enter her home because he saw her bedroom light was off and thought she was asleep. So he went back to the party. The investigators stumbled upon another peculiar aspect of Joe's behavior. After leaving the party, he frequently dialed Katie's cell phone, which was still in her purse, and persisted in doing so until morning. The question was whether Joe was attempting to establish an alibi for himself or feigned concern for Katie's well-being. The investigators wanted Joe to explain his suspicious behavior, but he refused to cooperate with them any further. Despite loving Joe deeply, Katie's family was shocked when he failed to attend her funeral, which only fueled their suspicions. In the end, the investigators only needed one thing to clear Joe's name: a DNA sample. Experts discovered DNA samples at 3 different locations on Katie's body, with most of it located under her fingernails. The DNA was identified as human skin cells. Notably, all the DNA samples found on Katie's body came from the same individual. The police were keen to compare Joe's DNA with the DNA recovered from Katie's body, but they faced obstacles in doing so. At the time, Joe was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the investigators that Joe had declined to provide a DNA sample for testing. It was clear to everyone that Joe was hiding something and was likely involved in Katie's death, judging by his behavior. The police were convinced of his guilt, but they needed to find a legal way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, which took some time. At the same time, investigators were examining alternative explanations. They were researching similar crimes to determine if Katie was the sole victim of whoever ended her life. The DNA samples discovered on her body were compared to a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators went back to the starting point of their inquiry, the party where everything began. They managed to track down all the male guests who had attended the party and requested that each of them provide a DNA sample. Every single one of them complied, since they claimed to have nothing to conceal. Nevertheless, the results of the DNA analysis did not yield any matches with the DNA traces found on Katie's body. This lack of a match led the investigators to refocus their attention on Joe, the solitary individual who had declined to provide his DNA sample. The investigators discovered an alternative approach. Prior to attending the party, Katie and Joe had spent time in her bedroom, where they had been physically intimate. The police subsequently visited the house and collected the sheet from Katie's bed, suspecting they might find Joe's DNA on it. Their hunch proved correct. The laboratory analysis did reveal a sample of male DNA, but it did not correspond to the DNA found on Katie's body. This meant that Joe was not the perpetrator who attacked her. If Joe wasn't involved in what happened to his girlfriend, why did he initially refuse to cooperate with the police? Once the police sent the test results to his lawyer, Joe discovered he had been cleared as a suspect. Following this, Joe changed his mind and decided to talk to the police again, even providing a DNA sample. The new test results confirmed the initial finding. Joe was innocent of the crime. Joe refused to cooperate with the police because he had previously had intimate contact with Katie before the party, and he feared they would discover his DNA on her body. Despite their best efforts, the police and Katie's family couldn't understand Joe's behavior on the night of her death. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police had to explore alternative theories. Several partygoers informed the investigators that Katie was wearing rings on her fingers that night, including one given to her by Joe. However, when Katie's body was found, her fingers were bare. The police suspected that the killer had removed the rings. They searched all local pawn shops, but failed to find Katie's stolen jewelry. Near where Katie's body was discovered, another potential lead emerged in the form of tire tracks. Forensic experts successfully identified the brand and model of the tires in question. Upon contacting the manufacturer, the police learned that these specific tires are typically fitted to pickup trucks. Regrettably, this new information failed to bring the authorities any closer to catching the perpetrator, and the case ultimately stalled. About a year after Katie's incident, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. In Green Bay, a girl was attacked and suffered the same brutal fate as Katie. She was also set on fire, but miraculously, she managed to survive. The victim credited her survival to feigning death, which led the attackers to leave her. Once they were gone, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. She claimed to have been attacked by 2 Hispanic males, but the evidence in Katie's case suggested only one perpetrator was involved. To determine if there was a link between the 2 crimes, DNA analysis was necessary. The victim from Wisconsin provided a detailed description of her attackers to the police. When the Green Bay police released the composite sketches, a local farmer recognized the men as his employees, Gregorio Morales and Juan, since one of them had relatives in Las Cruces and often visited them. As a result, both men were arrested, and the police investigating Katie's case believed they had finally identified the culprit. However, the results of the DNA examination proved otherwise. The samples did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. These two men were later convicted of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not connected to the Katie case. Morales was sentenced to 50 years in prison and Gregorio to 50 years. Thus, the investigators reached another dead end. The only evidence the police had were tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family hoped that DNA would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life, but there were problems with that. It was not legal to take a DNA sample from anyone arrested by the police. Jen, Katie's mom, expressed her surprise and frustration about this. They had lost their daughter to a monster, and they needed justice, to know who had done this and why. And most of all, they needed to know that he would be stopped from doing this again. The detective leading Katie's case informed Jen that the only evidence they possessed was DNA. During her fierce struggle to survive, Katie had managed to collect her killer's blood and skin underneath her fingernails. The police had successfully extracted a DNA profile from this evidence and uploaded it into CODIS, a national forensic database. Detective Jones clarified that every week, this DNA evidence would be automatically cross-checked against the offender database to search for a potential match. This news brought renewed hope to Katie's family, as they were confident that they would eventually identify their daughter's killer once a matching profile was found. Detective Gian casually mentioned that the perpetrator was such a menace he'd likely be arrested again soon, at which point his DNA would be collected and entered into the system, leading to his identification and eventual conviction. However, Detective Jones contradicted him, explaining that this process isn't possible in New Mexico or most other states, as it's against the law to collect DNA samples from someone simply because they've been arrested. 3.5 years after Katie's death, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case on December 18, 2006. A DNA sample was discovered that matched the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The attacker was identified as 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father of one who had no prior connection to Katie. Notably, Avila had a lengthy criminal history and had been released from prison just shortly before Katie's murder on November 13, 2003. Less than 3 months after killing Katie, Avila was caught and arrested for breaking into an apartment shared by 2 young women carrying a knife. Fortunately, the college roommates managed to avoid an attack by locking themselves in the bathroom and quickly calling the police. In March 2004, Avila was found guilty of aggravated burglary with the intention of committing aggravated assault. However, after being released on bail, Avila fled instead of facing justice. Avila could have been caught and arrested just 3 months after Katie's attack, but due to flaws in the system, it took 3.5 years to establish a connection between him and Katie's death. Avila evaded police for almost a year before being caught in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence, and a DNA sample was taken when he entered prison, but it sat untested for another 2 years. When the results finally came back, showing a partial match to DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators sprang into action, tracking down the truck Avila used to dispose of her body, where they found a ring that belonged to Katie. This case highlights the need for system change. The police wasted resources and time searching for the perpetrator for 3 years, which could have been avoided if they had taken a DNA sample from Avila during his initial arrest. Moreover, it is astonishing that his DNA sample was only tested 2 years later, in 2006. Detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after finding her ring in his pickup truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed that he offered Katie a ride when he saw her, but she declined. Later, he saw her again outside her house and stopped to offer help when she said she couldn't get in because she didn't have her purse. Katie tried to climb into her bedroom window, but Avila attacked and undressed her. Unsure what to do next, Avila strangled Katie, fearing she would identify him later. He then put her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill, where he dumped her body and attempted to set it on fire to destroy evidence, but his plan failed. Avila's DNA sample was recollected, and it matched DNA evidence found on Katie's body from 2003. Her parents were hopeful this new finding would lead to a swift investigation. However, they were shocked to discover that, in New Mexico and nearly every other state, it was illegal to collect DNA samples from individuals upon arrest. Instead, DNA was only entered into the system after someone had been convicted and sentenced to prison. This discovery prompted Katie's parents to launch a nationwide campaign, seeking to pass a law in all 50 states requiring individuals arrested for violent crimes to provide a DNA sample. The DNA would then be added to the CODIS national database, facilitating investigations and potentially solving crimes. In 2006, Katie's law was passed by the New Mexico state legislature with a near-unanimous vote of only 5 dissenting voices, and was subsequently signed into law in March 2006. Following the relentless advocacy of Katie's parents, the legislation was eventually adopted at the federal level in 2010. To date, over 31 states have enacted laws similar to New Mexico's Katie's Law. Katie's father, David, had long feared that another person would suffer the same fate as his daughter at the hands of her killer. But with the law now in place, he can finally find some comfort and relief. Opponents of this policy argue it invades privacy and violates civil rights, while others note that DNA, unlike fingerprints, contains sensitive genetic information. In the case of United States versus Kincaid, a federal district court ruled that collecting DNA samples before conviction and including them in the national DNA database does not violate constitutional rights. In 2017, Gabriel Avila's trial got underway. During the proceedings, Avila offered a heartfelt apology to Katie's family. His lawyer pleaded with the judge to show mercy, citing Avila's remorsefulness as a mitigating factor. District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that Avila had delayed his confession for over 3 years, only coming forward when confronted with irrefutable DNA evidence by detectives. At the sentencing hearing, Katie's father, David, addressed the judge, imploring him not to be lenient with the punishment. He argued that his family would never have the opportunity to see Katie again, and it was only fair that the person responsible for her death should not be allowed to experience freedom again in their own lifetime. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and received a 69-year prison sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years of his sentence. Jenna believes that true closure is unattainable, but she is now ready to move forward. She, her husband, and their 2 other children have been healing and progressing with their lives, and they cherish their remaining kids deeply. Additionally, Jenny has pledged that she and her husband will persist in their efforts to have Katie's Law enacted in all 50 states as a testament to their deceased daughter. In the case of Jorge Cortez, justice seemed to be an elusive but deeply desired goal. Families held on to the hope that one day the truth would emerge. This dramatic narrative weaves together fates marked by love and loss, courage and despair. Follow the unfolding events to discover whether the families will achieve retribution and justice. Jorge's latest victim was his new girlfriend, whose name was Carmelinga Alanis Campira. Born on December 10, 1985, she had a profound love for animals, particularly cats. Her passion for animals initially led her to pursue veterinary studies at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. However, due to challenges with practical training, she couldn't complete her veterinary education. Consequently, she shifted her focus to philology, determined to continue her academic and professional journey. At the age of 31, Campira was living in a middle-class neighborhood in the Santo Domingo colony in Mexico. She shared her home with her two sons, aged 12 and 3, as well as her brother Gabriel. Campira's first child was born to her late husband, Juan Carlos, who tragically passed away from cancer in 2012. Despite the adversity, Campira gave birth to her daughter a few months after her husband's death and devoted herself entirely to raising her children. Financially, the family relied on a pension and rental income from apartments. While Campira shared a close relationship with her mother Margarita, she confided more in her aunt Sandra, who was both her confidant and close friend. Though her life was dedicated to her children, Campira harbored a secret desire for romantic love, longing for a partner who would accept and love her children. In the realm of social media, Campira found a glimmer of hope in Jorge, a 38-year-old man. Jorge, introducing himself as Joy Draga, portrayed himself as a widower residing in Mexico City. His social media page featured various photos depicting his life, including a poignant image captioned, "Rest in peace, my love." Yet, amidst this seemingly normal facade, a mystery lingered. Who was Yang, whose death Jorge referenced on his page? This enigmatic mention of Yang added layers of intrigue to an already compelling narrative, hinting at hidden secrets waiting to be unraveled. As the story unfolds, one cannot help but feel the palpable anticipation of delving into the depths of these mysteries, each clue serving as a tantalizing glimpse into a complex web of secrets and unexpected revelations. This is the story of Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, born on January 5, 1978 in Mexico City. Jorge kept his childhood and teenage years veiled in secrecy. In various interviews, he hinted at constant conflicts with his caring mother, while his weak-willed father remained passive amidst their quarrels. These tumultuous family dynamics likely contributed to Jorge's emotional isolation and the eventual formation of his aggressive and unstable personality. At an early age, Jorge decided to distance himself from his parents and embarked on a journey around the world. He took up temporary jobs that allowed him to traverse various states of Mexico, working as a waiter in bars across Mexico City's Rosa and Cona districts. He also relied on tips from tourists in the Villadó and Cuac districts, known for their vibrant infrastructure and entertainment options. It was during this time that Jorge delved into criminal activities. In 2010, Jorge was apprehended on theft charges and sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, due to it being his first offense, the judge granted him bail. Little did anyone anticipate that this leniency would unleash a potential criminal who would later become one of Mexico's most wanted fugitives. Following his release, Jorge crossed paths with Adriana Ramos, whom he fell deeply in love with. Initially, Jorge showered Adriana with affection, but as the relationship progressed, his violent tendencies surfaced. Within months, Adriana became a victim of Jorge's physical abuse. Fearing for her safety, Adriana resolved to end the relationship. One fateful night, Jorge's rage reached a boiling point. He viciously attacked Adriana, dragging her down the stairs by her hair, breaking her nose, and rendering her unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, Adriana found Jorge threatening to ignite the gas in the kitchen, intending to end both their lives if she dared to leave him. Despite the terror, Adriana summoned the strength to resist. In a desperate struggle for survival, she fought back, eventually managing to free herself from Jorge's grip. Armed with a hammer, she fought off her assailant, miraculously pushing him out of the apartment and out of her life forever. In retrospect, Adriana realized that her courageous act not only liberated her from a violent relationship, but potentially saved her from an even grimmer fate. In 2011, Jorge once again managed to evade punishment. Similar to his previous charge, he was released on bail immediately. Soon after, he found a new victim in the form of an 18-year-old girl named Yang Kyung-marie Hbga, a Korean national. Yang shared a strong bond with her mother, Monica, and her sister, Anna. Anna, being passionate about sports and socializing, led a vibrant life, balancing her studies in psychology with work at a local restaurant. She resided in the lively Roma colony, an upscale neighborhood in Mexico City. Jorge and Yang crossed paths on one of Jorge's shifts at a nearby bar. There was an instant spark between them, leading to a whirlwind romance. However, beneath the surface, their relationship was marred by violence. Despite frequent conflicts, Jorge and Yang persisted in their tumultuous affair. At the age of 19, Yang made the decision to assert her independence from her family, opting to move to the city with Jorge. However, this change of scenery only exacerbated their issues. Jorge's behavior became increasingly controlling, monitoring Yang's every move, even calling her incessantly at work and limiting her interactions with friends. Gradually, Yang realized she had become ensnared in Jorge's web of dominance and aggression. Desperate to maintain appearances, she remained silent about the domestic abuse, severing communication with her family to spare them from worry. Only her sister Anna and a handful of close friends were privy to the torment she endured behind closed doors. Despite her family's pleas for her to leave Jorge, Yang remained entangled in the toxic relationship, unable to break free from the cycle of abuse. Jorge and Yang's tumultuous relationship was marked by a cycle of attempts to break free, followed by a return to the toxic embrace of Jorge's manipulation. Despite her best efforts to leave him, Yang found herself ensnared by her own fears and vulnerabilities, unable to break the chains that bound her to Jorge. As time passed, Yang underwent a profound transformation, her once cheerful demeanor giving way to deep-seated depression as she desperately sought to please Jorge at any cost. Their relationship grew increasingly volatile, punctuated by episodes of violence and control. One fateful day in August 2014, following yet another explosive argument, Yang made the courageous decision to leave Jorge and seek refuge with her parents. Encouraged by a concerned friend, she even contemplated involving the authorities to put an end to her suffering. However, the grip of Jorge's manipulation proved too strong, and Yang soon found herself drawn back into his web. Tragically, just 2 weeks later, on the morning of September 21st, Yang's lifeless body was discovered in their apartment. Jorge claimed to have found her hanging in the bedroom, her body bearing the telltale signs of bruising. According to his testimony, he had left the house the previous day, leaving Yang asleep after her shift at the bar. Upon his return the next morning, he allegedly discovered her lifeless form and promptly notified the authorities and Yang's family of the tragic turn of events. Despite Jorge's claims, suspicion shrouded the circumstances of Yang's death, leaving lingering questions about what truly transpired in the final moments of her life. As authorities began their investigation, Yang's family grappled with the devastating loss of their beloved daughter and sister. Their grief compounded by the shadow of doubt cast over the official account of events. The devastating news of Yang's untimely death sent shockwaves through her family, prompting her sister Monica and niece Anna to rush to the scene. As they arrived at Yang's residence, they were met with a flurry of activity, with police officers and criminologists already on site, meticulously processing the grim aftermath. Their anguish deepened as they witnessed the solemn procession of Yang's lifeless body being carefully removed from the bed. Jorge, Yang's husband, recounted his panicked attempts to aid his deceased wife, his distress palpable in the air. However, their anguish was compounded by the denial of access to the apartment, as they were informed that an ongoing investigation necessitated the preservation of evidence. Helpless, they could only watch as Yang's body, shrouded in a sheet, was solemnly carried out of the house. Amidst their grief, the family grappled with the perplexing narrative of suicide put forth by the authorities. While detectives leaned towards this conclusion, citing the position of the body and Jorge's purported account, Yang's loved ones vehemently contested this theory. Their skepticism was fueled by the absence of any discernible signs of distress in Yang's demeanor prior to her death, leaving them incredulous at the notion that she would take her own life. Moreover, upon closer inspection of the body, they noted bruising on Yang's legs, casting doubt on the initial assessment of suicide by hanging. As they embarked on the somber task of identifying Yang's body and navigating the bureaucratic formalities, the family found themselves thrust into a harrowing journey, seeking answers amidst the fog of grief and uncertainty. Jorge's attempt to rationalize his actions fell flat as he claimed that the body slipped from his grasp, an explanation met with skepticism by Yang's sister, Monica. Doubts surrounding Jorge's narrative deepened upon hearing testimonies from Yang's friends, who shed light on the tumultuous dynamics within the relationship. According to them, Jorge exhibited controlling and jealous behavior, incessantly calling Yang at work to monitor her every move. Anna, Yang's sister, recounted a noticeable shift in Yang's demeanor since the inception of her relationship with Jorge, noting her gradual estrangement from the family. Despite mounting suspicions and testimonies highlighting Jorge's volatile nature, the police seemed uninterested in pursuing further inquiries, swiftly closing the case by attributing Yang's death to suicide. This decision left Yang's family reeling with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of injustice. Compounding their anguish, the suggestion to cremate Yang's body dashed any hopes of conducting comprehensive forensic investigations. Tormented by suspicions of Jorge's involvement, Yang's mother reluctantly consented to cremation, forgoing the chance to substantiate her suspicions. Jorge's conspicuous absence at the funeral, coupled with his ostensible display of grief through a tattoo of a broken heart, rang hollow in the eyes of Yang's grieving family. His subsequent withdrawal from contact with Yang's relatives only fueled their suspicions further, exacerbating their collective anguish. Yang's tragic demise reverberated throughout the family, plunging them into a maelstrom of grief, loneliness, and despair. Monica, unable to cope with the overwhelming pain of loss, sought solace in alcohol and cigarettes, further isolating herself from her husband and remaining family members. The once harmonious household now suffocated under the weight of sorrow, with tensions escalating to the point where one of Yang's sisters felt compelled to leave, unable to bear witness to the unraveling of their familial bonds in the wake of tragedy. Yang, equipped with an education in culinary arts, harbored dreams of launching her own business. However, her untimely demise shattered these aspirations, plunging the family into a downward spiral. Despite grappling with grief, Monica, Yang's mother, refused to accept the official narrative surrounding her daughter's death. Maternal instincts and a quest for justice fueled Monica's determination to uncover the truth. Yang's zest for life contradicted the notion that she took her own life. Monica found no solace in the details: bruises marring her daughter's body, the absence of a suicide note, and strands of hair missing from her scalp. Convinced of foul play, Monica embarked on a personal crusade for justice. Taking matters into her own hands, Monica procured surveillance footage from Yang's residence, revealing her husband, Jorge, as the last person to see Yang alive. Armed with this revelation, Monica enlisted legal aid and secured the services of a private medical examiner to reassess the circumstances surrounding Yang's demise. The re-examination unearthed startling revelations, challenging the initial findings. Forensic evidence pointed to a violent death. Marks on Yang's neck indicated strangulation, not hanging. The scene had been meticulously staged to conceal the truth. Bruises on Yang's hands and nails hinted at a struggle against her assailant. Questioning the negligence of law enforcement became paramount. Monica's relentless pursuit of truth spanned 7 months, unveiling a series of oversights and incompetence within the investigative process. It emerged that Yang had previously sought police intervention due to Jorge's violence, but her pleas were disregarded. Monica's quest for justice became a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of despair. In her relentless pursuit, she unraveled a web of negligence, exposing systemic failures that had previously shrouded Yang's tragic demise. Through unwavering determination, Monica sought to rectify the injustices that had befallen her daughter. Monica's journey for justice evolved into an exhaustive quest to unravel the depths of Jorge's depravity. She unearthed damning evidence linking Jorge not only to his father, but also to individuals involved in the case's investigation. The pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce, painting a chilling portrait of Jorge's true nature. Driven by her unwavering maternal love and an unyielding commitment to truth, Monica tirelessly pursued justice. Despite facing skepticism and resistance, she refused to be silenced. Each roadblock only fueled her determination to hold Jorge accountable for his actions. As Monica delved deeper into the investigation, she uncovered disturbing truths about Jorge's past. His connections to criminal elements cast a sinister shadow over Yang's tragic demise, challenging the initial narrative of suicide propagated by the authorities. The prosecutor's office, instead of offering support, met Monica's demands with callous indifference. Advised to abandon her pursuit of justice and seek psychological help, Monica stood her ground, undeterred by the dismissive attitude of those in power. Yang's story transcended the confines of tragedy, becoming a testament to the enduring power of love and the relentless pursuit of truth. In 2016, Jorge's heinous actions claimed yet another victim, thrusting Monica into a new realm of darkness and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Campira's initial infatuation with Jorge gave way to a horrifying realization as Monica's investigation unearthed chilling details about his past. The facade of charm and charisma crumbled, revealing the monstrous depths of Jorge's true identity. Campira found herself ensnared in a web of deceit and danger, her once bright future overshadowed by the looming specter of Jorge's malevolence. As the end of 2016 approached, the anticipation of New Year's festivities filled the air. Yet for Margarita and her family, it marked the beginning of a harrowing ordeal. On December 28th, Margarita had an encounter with Jorge, a day that would later be etched in her memory with sorrow. It was a day like any other, as Campira, Jorge, and her grandchildren embarked on a trip to Acapulco to spend the holidays with Margarita and her husband. The atmosphere was festive, brimming with laughter and the promise of joyful moments together. As the days passed, Jorge, with his persuasive charm, managed to convince Campira to extend their stay in Acapulco. Reluctantly, Margarita agreed to take care of the children for a few more days, allowing Campira and Jorge to enjoy an extended holiday until January 5th. Little did they know that these seemingly innocent decisions would lead to unfathomable tragedy. 3 days after their departure, the unthinkable occurred. Campira's vibrant presence was suddenly extinguished, her lifeless body discovered under circumstances that would forever haunt her loved ones. The last exchange between mother and daughter occurred on December 30th, leaving Margarita with a lingering sense of unease. Despite her attempts to reach Campira on New Year's Eve, the silence on the other end of the line only deepened her worry. With each unanswered call and unreturned message, Margarita's concern grew into a gnawing fear. It was unlike Campira to be out of touch, especially during such a celebratory time. Despite Jorge's attempts to quell her apprehensions by attributing Campira's absence to a quarrel and a night out with friends, Margarita's maternal instincts screamed otherwise. Driven by an insatiable need for answers, Margarita reached out to a trusted family friend, hoping to unravel the mystery shrouding her daughter's whereabouts. Their visit to Campira's home was met with Jorge's unconvincing explanation, claiming that Campira was asleep and unavailable to meet. Yet, his demeanor betrayed an underlying tension, leaving Margarita with a sinking feeling that Jorge was concealing vital information. As the pieces of this sinister puzzle began to fall into place, Margarita realized that the truth lay buried beneath layers of deception. With determination, fueled by grief and a mother's unwavering love, she resolved to uncover the dark secrets veiled by Jorge's facade. Little did she know that her quest for justice would unearth a web of lies, deceit, and unspeakable horrors, altering the course of their lives forever. On December 31st, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., Jorge brutally murdered Campira by strangling her. Before committing the crime, he brutally beat her with an unknown object, causing many injuries on her face and body. To create a false scene that she committed suicide, he cut off a lock of her hair, placed her lifeless body on the bed, covered it with a blanket, and turned on the gas stove. Jorge even placed a portrait of Campira's deceased ex-husband in her hands to create the impression that her death was due to the memory of him. At about 8:30 p.m., after packing his things, he left the house. On the night of January 1st, 2017, Margarita could not contact her daughter to wish her a happy new year, so she called her son Gabriel, who was in the same city as Campira. When Gabriel arrived at her house, he immediately smelled a strong smell of gas. After turning off all the gas stoves, he went looking for Campira, and when he discovered her lifeless body on the sofa, he was horrified to see bruises from the brutal beating on her face. When Gabriel pulled back the blanket, He was horrified to see Campira lying motionless, wearing only underwear, and her body covered in bruises. Many details immediately attracted his attention. There were drops of blood around Campira, even though her body and underwear were clean as if she had just taken a shower. Additionally, there was no longer a lock of hair on her head, which was especially strange for Gabriel because Campira always took good care of her hair and never cut it like that. Stunned, Gabriel immediately reported the incident to the police and then contacted his mother. For Margarita, this news was a real shock, like a sharp blade piercing her heart, dividing her life into before and after. Not only did her world collapse, but so did the world of Campira's children and their entire families. Minutes after Gabriel's call, a team of paramedics and police arrived at the house. After declaring Campira's death, they sealed off the scene and restricted access for relatives of the deceased. The Campira family, overwhelmed by grief, could not believe what had happened. Their eyes reflected not only pain but also a glimmer of hope that justice would be served. The bruises on Campira's body, the absence of a lock of hair, and the crime scene were not consistent with the theory that she had committed suicide. The police began meticulously examining the scene, recording every detail. They have a difficult task ahead of them in understanding the circumstances of Campira's death to make a clear line. Finding the truth and distinguishing between truth and lies, as well as finding the guilty, is a complex process. At the initial stage, based on the first results of the autopsy, the police hypothesized suicide. According to their theory, Campira wanted to end his life by turning on the gas to poison himself. However, the deceased's family firmly rejected this theory. They couldn't believe that a cheerful young woman who had overcome the pain of losing her husband and was a loving mother of 2 children could do such a thing. Their belief in Campira's violent death was further reinforced by the absence of locks of hair that could not be found in the house. Convinced of their suspicions, Campira's family demanded a more thorough investigation. Unlike Yang's case, this time the authorities did not ignore their requests. A second forensic examination confirmed their fears. Campira had been strangled and the fake suicide scene was just a clever disguise. This is evidenced by marks on the trachea and neck, as well as bruises indicating beatings and the absence of locks of hair. After confirming the crime, Koyan police began an active investigation. Campira's aunt, Sandra, found support from the deputy public prosecutor and ensured the case was transferred to the prosecutor's office for investigation. However, progress in the investigation has been slow and painful. Just a short time later, Sandra was called back to the prosecutor's office, where she was informed that she and her brother Gabriel could be plaintiffs in the case. The children of the deceased woman, left without a mother, were placed in the care of their grandmother immediately after the tragedy. They have been transferred to a new school. The family tries to protect them from horrifying memories and help them adapt to the new reality, but time cannot heal such wounds. The Campira family is looking forward to news, but the investigation is at a standstill. It was only after 2.5 months that they were allowed into the apartment where Campira's body was found to collect his belongings and possibly find clues. They discovered Campira's laptop in the apartment, but were disappointed to see that all the information on it had been erased, leaving no trace. Luckily, Campira's iPad was protected by a password they remembered. The last photos she took before her death were a big shock to her family. In one photo, Campira lies peacefully next to Jorge on the sofa where her body was later found. Other photos showed Jorge, including one of him holding a box of skulls that was later found in the apartment's freezer and with one hand strangling her. In a desk drawer, they found sketches of the tattoo Jorge planned to get. These photos only increased the family's suspicions about Jorge's involvement in the crime. The new evidence found in the apartment is truly a big discovery for the Campira family. Campira's peaceful photos contrast with Jorge's macabre photos, and the horror tattoo sketches leave no doubt about his involvement in this tragedy. Campira's aunt, not resigned to the government's inaction, created a social networking site called Justice for All. On the page, she posted photos of Jorge, asking users to share any information about him, his location, or his connection to the crime. When she came across this page, Monica, Yang's mother, who was found dead in 2014 in similar circumstances, was horrified to realize that Jorge was the one who killed her daughter. She immediately contacted Campira's family and shared her story. Margarita and Monica, two mothers, are linked by tragic fate. Their daughters died 2 years apart, allegedly by the same person. In Yang's case, as is well known, the police not only failed to investigate the case properly, but also failed to consider the possibility of violent death. During their own investigation, the two mothers discover a horrifying common denominator. In both cases, Jorge acted according to the same script. He makes girls fall in love with him, isolates them from family and friends, then kills them in cold blood, making it appear they committed suicide. One of the key elements in his sinister plan was to cut off a lock of each victim's hair. This horrifying detail connects both cases, hinting at Jorge's pathological obsession with his victim's hair. His motives remain a mystery, but his propensity for violence and manipulation leaves no doubt about his involvement in these deaths. Sometime later, the deceased woman's family was able to obtain footage from a surveillance camera installed at a neighbor's house. The footage shows Jorge entering the house and then 6 hours later rushing out, taking several things with him. It was determined that Jorge was home from 5:05 to 8:30 p.m. on December 31st, which coincided with the conclusions of forensic experts on Sierra's death. The discovery of these videos completely changed the course of the investigation, making Jorge the main suspect. From that point on, investigators began actively searching for him, but by that time, he had disappeared without a trace. Jorge quit all his jobs, stopped being active on social networks, and ceased communicating with his friends. It was clear he was in hiding, which further increased suspicions about him. The Mexico City Prosecutor General's office put its full force behind the investigation, realizing Jorge was a threat to society, and possibly his new girlfriend could be the next victim. However, the search for Jorge yielded no results after several months. The Mexican police turned to international help, placing Jorge on the international wanted list and expanding the search to over 100 countries. Thanks to the efforts of Campira and Yang's mothers, these cases were widely publicized in the media, and Jorge quickly earned the nickname Lady Killer. As soon as the story of Jorge's crimes became public, other women who were also his victims but had escaped began contacting the police to expose his brutal behavior. These women shared eerily similar stories about how their romantic relationships with Jorge turned into nightmares of physical and verbal abuse. One of Jorge's ex-girlfriends, Adriana, shared a heartbreaking story of abuse and testified to the police about Sierra's death. Sierra's case highlighted a pattern where both she and Yang had a lock of hair missing, both were said to have taken a shower before their deaths, and both were in a relationship with Jorge. It seemed that this man had committed a terrible crime. During the investigation, more gruesome details were revealed, such as the public learning that Jorge had been released on bail in 2009, sparking a wave of anger. Many realized that if he had been detained sooner, these young women might still be alive. While Campira and Yang's families continued their relentless fight for justice on social media, a page dedicated to their memory gathered more than 13,000 subscribers. They united to demand justice for the women who died. 10 months after his escape, on October 24, 2017, Jorge paid the price for his actions. His arrest came suddenly during a raid by the National Civil Police in the Guatemalan city of Livingston. Guards patrolling the streets noticed a suspicious man who looked like a homeless person. Simple paperwork and fingerprint checks shocked them. This man was on the international wanted list with a red danger level. Jorge was immediately taken to the Guatemalan capital's immigration center for preventive measures and detained. Central American authorities immediately contacted their Mexican counterparts and initiated extradition proceedings. According to Guatemalan Police Chief Pablo Castillo, Jorge had been hiding under a bridge in the west of his country of birth, living on the streets and surviving thanks to the charity of kind travelers. The very next day, October 25th, he was taken to the border with Mexico, to the city of Chiapas, where he was handed over to the staff of the Criminal Investigation Agency after going through a two-way border zone. Jorge was finally brought to justice in Mexico City. When Jorge appeared in court to answer for his crimes, one of the reporters tried to question him, but instead of answers, he only heard clear denials. Jorge claimed he felt guilty, but he said he knew nothing about the charges against him. On October 26th, Jorge was taken to court for preventive measures. He was charged with the murder of Campira. During the trial, the prosecution presented irrefutable evidence of Jorge's involvement in the crime. The investigation showed that he not only mercilessly strangled the victim, but also brutally beat her, inflicting multiple blows with an unknown object. He was also convicted of theft and his possible involvement in the death of his ex-girlfriend Yang. Despite irrefutable evidence, procedural arguments, and testimony from witnesses, Jorge's lawyers gave a new version, claiming their client was suffering from a mental disorder and requested psychological treatment. After carefully considering all the arguments, the judge turned to Jorge and his lawyer, asking how long it would take to conduct a psychological examination. The defendant's lawyer, after consulting with his client, requested that Jorge attend all court hearings. After thoroughly studying the arguments of both parties and all the documents related to the case, the judge made a decision. Acknowledging that the prosecutor's office had provided enough evidence to hold Jorge criminally responsible for the crime of femicide, the court also decided to continue the investigative trial and allow 4 months to search for new evidence. During this time, Jorge was taken into custody and placed in the pre-trial detention center. Even though Jorge was arrested and found guilty by the court, the families of Campira and Yang still faced a long and difficult trial ahead. The defense used all kinds of legal loopholes to delay the trial for years, including filing a request for the habeas corpus procedure to claim that Jorge's rights had been violated. The prosecutor's office had to engage in a difficult struggle with Jorge's lawyers, who tried their best to protect their client from conviction. In August 2019, an intermediary hearing was held in the form of oral proceedings. Jorge's lawyer requested to exclude from the case videos showing him entering and leaving Sira's house on the day she was murdered. They argued that the videos were just fragments from 30 hours of footage from the crime scene and could not be evidence of their client's guilt. The video was obtained from Campira's neighbors, who gave it to the victim's family, and the family turned it over to the police for investigation. However, the original videos were lost, and the copies recorded on a disc were taken to court. Jorge's lawyer claimed that the Mexico City prosecutor's office withheld this evidence until the hearing date and argued that the video should not be used as evidence. The supervising judge, after hearing the defendant's arguments, the prosecutor's office, and the testimony of Campira's friends and neighbors, refuted the defense attorney's petition. 2 more witness statements were not admissible as evidence, but their content was considered by the court. The case was referred to the court, and Jorge had the right to appeal if convicted, which allowed him to present similar arguments. While the Campira case was ongoing in court, the Yang family fought their own battle. Thanks to the efforts of activists from the Mexican Institute for Human Rights and Democracy, National Civilian Observatory Against the Genocide of Women, and the One Justice Center, a decree prohibiting femicide was passed in Mexico City. The Yang case was one of several crimes that prompted authorities to make this decision. Yang's death was also reclassified as a femicide and transferred to the Mexico City court 7 years after the tragedy. In May 2021, a criminal case was opened against Jorge, and on May 6th of the same year, a judge ordered his arrest for Yang's murder. However, Jorge's lawyers exploited every loophole to delay the investigation and sentencing. The fight for justice was not in vain. 9 years after Yang's death, in November 2023, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, 45 years old, also known as El Motovas, was convicted and sentenced to 52 years and 6 months in prison for taking Yang's life. Although the Yang family achieved justice, the Campira family still had a long way to go. The trial was scheduled to begin in April 2022. At the detention center where Jorge was being held, activists were determined that this time the criminal would not shirk responsibility. However, Jorge's lawyers once again requested to postpone the scheduled hearing. On January 29, 2024, more than 50 witnesses were scheduled to be invited to the hearing. As of now, there is no information about this in the family media. While nothing can bring Campira back, her loved ones crave justice to prevail, ensuring that her death will not go unpunished.